All right, welcome to EDL712, Facilitating Human Resource Development and Empowerment. We're going to talk about the role of human resources administration, and we're going to talk about the people who may be involved in taking responsibility for those roles and making sure that that process is carried out. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here. Here we are, Facilitating Human Resource Development and Empowerment. These first two we'll look at. Well, I'll back up one. You see the name there by Human Resource Administration, the name Rebor. This came out of a book written by a man named Rebor. However, I've seen a number of HR books, school HR books, that have these same responsibilities listed. So I don't know that it's necessarily just one man's idea. This is pretty much generally the areas that have to be covered in human resource administration. If you ever see a book by Rebor, he has written a good book on school human resource administration. Number one, human resource planning. Establishing a master plan of long and short range personnel requirements is a necessary ingredient in the school district's curricular and planning processes. You may not think about this as much, but HR planning is actually very, very important. When you have an increase in enrollment, you don't need to start the school year without enough teachers. You have to plan adequately. If a school is having a decrease in enrollment, some action may have to be taken to make sure that you're not overstaffed. Administrators have to stay on top of the situation and find some way to try to project what your HR needs are going to be. Usually your HR needs are going to be driven by the number of students that you have. You have more students, you need more teachers. Of course, there's other people, there's other human resources other than just teachers, but oftentimes that also is affected by how many students that you have. But a district has to have someone who is determining how many people you're going to have working there. You're also going to have people who are keeping on top, staying on top of issues like how many people are planning on resigning next year. Maybe we're not increasing or decreasing faculty, but maybe some people are resigning and we have to replace them. We don't need to be caught by surprise by that. Maybe we have people who are retiring. That doesn't need to be a big surprise to everyone. As early as you can know these things, school administrators need to know these facts so that they can project and do a good job of planning human resources. If you're having a decline in enrollment or the financial situation has gotten real tight in the higher ups at your school say, we can't have as many teachers. If you look at these people who are leaving and the people who are retiring, and then you can try to determine, do they have to be replaced? They don't have to be replaced. That's a painless way of cutting faculty. That's a painless way of going down to having fewer teachers without you having to take action to get rid of someone. Now, if you have some chemistry teachers that retire and you don't have anybody else to teach chemistry, well, then you've got to get somebody in there to teach chemistry. But generally, if administrators can stay on top of projecting what's going to happen, projecting what their needs are going to be, projecting who's going to be coming back next year, they can make their decisions based on that. They can add people, they can cut people. When people leave or retire, they can decide whether those people need to be replaced or if you can cut personnel units through attrition like that in a more painless way. But whatever it is, you can't just walk up in August and say, surprise, we didn't know what was going to happen. You've got to plan. You've got to be ahead of the game there and do a good job of planning human resources. One area in human resource administration. Another is the recruitment of personnel. Quality personnel are essential for the delivery of effective educational services to students and adults. Of course, when we recruit people, when we hire new people, we want good ones. We want quality people who do a good job. That sort of goes without saying. But sometimes they don't always just come walking in the front door. So what actions need to be taken to recruit people to come to our school? Whether that means going to career days, going to colleges and universities to try to recruit people that are coming out of college. I've known of administrators that have traveled to other states to recruit people to come into a place where maybe there's a shortage area and they can't find enough teachers. You can't just sit back and assume all the best people in the country are going to walk in to your school and apply. Sometimes there has to be an effort on the part of the school administrators to try to recruit good people. Again, that sort of ties in with the human resource planning. The selection of personnel. When you have a pool of applicants, which ones are you going to select? The long and short range human resource requirements are implemented through selection techniques and processes. You have to have your requirements for your school district. Some school districts will say, we don't hire anybody with a GPA of less than this, or we want this characteristic, or we want this characteristic. Or they may say, we don't care about certain characteristics as long as they're really strong in these other areas. But you have to have your system of selecting personnel. Many of you, when you are a principal, might have an opportunity to work with a teacher and think, man, I wish they had done a better job of selecting before they hired this teacher. You just can't leave it to chance. You have to try to have some influence in the selection of personnel. We're not always right. You know, you interview people, you go through their qualifications, you look at what your needs are to try to determine who it is you want to select. But this is a pretty important area and you have to be pretty careful doing it. Now, if there's a shortage of teachers and you barely have enough applicants to cover the openings that you have, selection doesn't work the same as it does when you have a large number of applicants and just a few openings. You can be picky in some situations. In some situations, you're the chooser, and in other situations, you are the beggar. Placement and induction of personnel. Through appropriate planning, new personnel and the school district accommodate each other's goals. You have to go back to the planning, so like we talked about in the beginning. You have to be planning how you're going to handle your human resource needs. Human resource administration is going to require planning. It's going to require people staying on top of the situation, knowing what our needs are going to be. But when you get people hired, you select personnel. Where you're going to place them is an issue. And induction of personnel. In other words, how you're going to train them to come to work for your school district. Now, some people are beginning teachers and they need some training about how things are going to work. Other people may be veteran teachers, but they're just new to your school district. They've been somewhere else, they've come to your place, and they need some training on how things work at your place. Veterans or beginners all still need induction when they go to work in your school district. Their needs are not exactly the same, but they need something. Sometimes people who've worked in one school district their whole career tend to think the way we do it is the way it's done. Everybody knows this. If you worked in schools, you know this is how it works. And they don't realize that it's not the way it's done in some other school districts. I knew of a situation one time where a person with experience was hired in another school district. They went to work there, and early in the year, they spent some of their class money that had been appropriated to them. And they used the exact procedures that they had used at their previous school. And so people got bent out of shape at the new school because they said, that's not the way we do it. We didn't know you were going to do this, and you didn't go through this channel, and you didn't do this process and all this. And they were sort of, like I said, bent out of shape about it. However, they never did explain to this teacher, this is the way we do it at our district. So this teacher came in, it was a female, and she was doing exactly what was considered right, the correct way at the last district. And then it made some people mad at the new district because she didn't do it right. But in their mind, because their procedures were different. It was the responsibility of the administrators at the new district to make sure the new teacher had proper induction and knew the rules. You can't blame somebody for not knowing something that you never told them. So this induction of personnel is super important when you're talking about beginners, but it's also important when you're talking about veterans who are coming to your school district, because it is a mistake to just assume that everyone else does it exactly like you do it, or every other school district does it exactly like your school district does it. Staff development. Development programs help personnel meet school district objectives and also provide individuals with the opportunity for personal and professional growth. Now, some of you may not think of staff development as being part of the Human Resource Administration. Most all of us have had the experience of going through some bad staff development. I have, and I know how terrible it is. I know how much I hated it and how much you probably hate it. Also know that I enjoyed really good staff development. That was beneficial. It helped me. And as I said, you put me in that situation and I actually enjoyed it. The staff development needs to meet the needs of the personnel there as they try to reach your objectives that your school district has set. They're being hired to do a job to reach your goals, to reach your objectives. Staff development should train them to help them reach those objectives. Now, we all have been in situations where the state requires you get so many hours of such and such training every year, and something else, the feds or the locals require you have this much training for this thing every year, and sometimes it almost takes up all of your staff development time. But ideally, you'll have some time to do some training, some staff development with your teachers to just help meet your goals, your objectives that you have set. And that new employee induction I was talking about a minute ago falls into that category. But this is one that, like I said, a lot of people don't think about this as necessarily being part of the HR role, the Human Resource Administration. But it is part of working with your people, your human resources. That's what your employees are. That's what you are. Very important resource in a school. It's all about people, human resources. Very important. They have to be taken care of. Appraisal of personnel. Process and techniques for appraisal help the individual grow professionally and help the school district attain its objectives. Oftentimes, you think of this as being maybe the principal's job, the appraisal, the principal's job, maybe a curriculum or instruction leader, whoever is involved in appraising teachers. But again, oftentimes people don't think of this as being part of the Human Resource Administration. But aren't teachers part of this entity I'm talking about called human resources? You're all resources, and you're human. You're all part of human resources. Sometimes when you're having to do some unpleasant things, maybe redirect someone's behavior, maybe get rid of someone, but at least tell some people, hey, you need to start doing better. Quit doing it like this, start doing it like this. You need to make some improvements. A lot of times that information is based on what you get from the appraisal of personnel. So staff development and appraisal of personnel, both, even though you may not think of it, are part of Human Resource Administration. Compensation of personnel. Many of you may just teach because you love it so much, but some people actually want to be paid. Establishing programs that reward quality performance helps to motivate personnel. Someone in your district has to determine exactly how people will be paid. Many of you are in districts that have a pay scale. Every year you get more and more. If you've got a master's degree above your bachelor's, then you may get more than that. You have 30 hours to pass a master's or have a doctorate, you may get more than that. Some school districts may have a step for every year for the first 20 years, and then it sort of flattens out. Another district may have an increase every year for 30 years. In most cases, the state's going to give a minimum. The state's going to say, here's the minimum you're going to pay. And a district pays that, or they pay above it. They can't pay below it, but they may decide how much they're going to pay above it. In some cases, we're competing with each other. So we want to try to pay, if we can afford it, a little more than that other one can, so we can get people that want to come work for us. We want our shot at the best teachers. Because as long as you're above whatever your minimum salary is, you can pay, your district can set up. You usually use the campus principal aren't going to decide how much you're going to pay somebody, but your district is going to determine this. Your school board, working with the superintendent, whoever, will determine this. But a factor that's a limiting factor in this is how much can they afford. They may say, we want to compete with these others, but we can't pay as much as they do. That's a very real part of school administration. It's a real part of human resource administration, and some of you may already know about this. You may have already been in a situation where you saw this. Some of you have left a job to go to a lower paying job because you preferred to be at that place, the place that had the lower paying salary. Some of you may have moved to go make more money. Some of you may be where you are and say, somebody down the road pays $300 more, but that's not enough to make a change, so I'm not going to go. Whatever it is, the compensation of personnel is one of the factors that you as an employee consider, and it's one of the things that has to be considered in human resource administration. Collective negotiations. Negotiating process gives personnel an opportunity to participate in matters that affect their professional and personal welfare. This depends on where you are. Oftentimes, there are teacher organizations that they'll go to the state capitol and say, teachers need to be making more money. And in some places where there's more active union activity, you may end up with collective negotiations. Sometimes it gets pretty hard hitting going on between the district and the teachers union, but that doesn't work the same everywhere. So this is one of the parts of human resource administration, but actually collective negotiations really depends on where you are. Some school districts, it's different than others. Some states, it's different than others. So I'm not trying to play this one down, but I'm saying this means something completely different in one place than it does in another. Whereas the others on this list pretty much mean the same thing everywhere. Okay, who's responsible for these things? Planning, recruitment, selection, placement and induction, staff development, appraisal, collective negotiations. Many of us tend to think, well, whatever's with HR office is handling that. Whatever, go fill out the form and they'll tell you about what you have to pay for insurance and they'll handle all that. But you can see right here from this list and these things we talked about, it's not all at the HR office. You have to have a lot of administrators involved in the planning, trying to determine how many kids we're going to have and what our needs are going to be. You may have some people outside of the HR office involved in the recruitment. Sometimes the HR office handles the first level, the first round of selection, and then principals may get involved in saying, okay, out of that bunch, I'm going to pick whichever one I want. Placement, induction, staff development. Does the HR office plan staff development? In most cases, probably not. Appraisal. My point here is that there's actually a number of people involved in human resources administration. It's not just those people at the HR office and you just forget about it and don't worry about it. When you're a campus level leader and you're a principal, I guarantee you're going to be making some decisions that affect human resources, and you're going to be affected by some decisions coming from human resources. But what our goal here is for you to get the big picture, what human resources is, and that there are a lot of different people involved in human resources. This right here, this point, is where you turn the corner and start seeing there's a little more to human resources than what you thought about before. But that's the whole idea here. You're supposed to be learning something. Read over these things and you give some thought to who handles those issues in your district. Okay. that's all we'll do on this one today.